Hello, I'm Stuart Ruckledge, the fire engineer at Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service. Following a fatal fire in Leicestershire in 2015, a subsequent coroners found that creams that contain paraffin are highly flammable and the residue acts as an accelerant. Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service have carried out some experiments in order to learn more about the dangers and consequences of emollient creams that contain paraffin. This would enable us to protect and advise our local communities of Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire. To help us carry out these experiments, a t-shirt was kindly donated by a local user of such creams. This had not been washed and we needed to see whether this had an effect on the flammability. As we couldn't use human skin, a local butcher's kindly donated some pieces of pork skin. 4 different experiments were staged, each using a naked flame and a cigarette as the ignition source. All tests were filmed at real time and lasted for 60 seconds. However, where there were no adverse reactions, the films have been cut. Experiments 1 and 2 were the clothing that had been donated by a user of emollient creams, which had traces of cream on them as they had not been washed. As you can see, the naked flame ignited immediately and propagated flame for about 30 seconds. As the flame dies down, you can see slight red embers of smouldering, but there's no flame after 30 seconds. The next ignition source is using a cigarette, which is actually in contact with the material, and as you can see there is no flame propagation. The only adverse effects are smouldering around the area where the cigarette has actually touched the cloth. A little bit of smoke is given off, but other than direct contact there is no flame propagation. Experiments 3 and 4 is where we've wiped cream directly onto the pigskin to replicate cream being applied to a human body. As you can see, there is no flame propagation, just slight scorching around the area where the match is touching the skin. We had to relight the match because, as you could see, the match burnt through, and we wanted to carry these experiments out for a full 60 seconds. Slight brown scorching marks around where the flame has hit the pork. Now the same experiment with the cigarette as the ignition source. There's no flame propagation or adverse effects other than what you would expect from direct contact with a cigarette on skin. Experiments 5 and 6 This is where we wiped cream directly onto the clothing. As you can see, immediately after a naked flame was introduced to the cloth, there is flame propagation. This is continuing now to a fully developed fire. The whole piece of clothing becomes fully developed in fire with flame propagation. Experiment 6, the ignition source was changed from a naked flame to that of a cigarette. Unlike the naked flame, there is no flame propagation. The typical scorching marks and burning, smouldering from the cigarette actually coming into contact with the cloth. When the cigarette end was removed, there was still some glowing embers. But very different to that of a naked flame. The final scenario was that would be typically of a situation where the person using emollient creams has wiped cream onto the skin and then over the top have put their normal clothes. As you can see, the clothing ignited immediately with a naked flame and propagated flame continuing to develop into a fully developed fire. The pigskin is shrinking due to the heat. The pigskin has reduced to half the size it was originally, and this image shows the scorch marks to the skin. The final ignition source for this scenario is the cigarette end. Again, the cream has been wiped onto the pigskin and the clothing added to the top. There's no flame propagation, just smouldering clothing around the area where the cigarette has been touching the cloth.